April 1983. Metallica are a nobody band with 0 albums, 0 money, and everything to prove. Dave Mustaine is their lead guitarist, fast, vicious, genuinely dangerous. Then, one morning, he wakes up on a Greyhound bus heading back to California fired with a 4-day ride to think about what just happened. The reason? Drunk, aggressive behavior the rest of the band had finally had enough of. Here's the brutal irony. Metallica hadn't even recorded their debut yet. Mustaine missed the entire ride. He went on to form Megadeth, sold tens of millions of records, and built one of the greatest metal careers of all time, but he never stopped being furious about it. He openly went after Metallica's legacy for decades. You could argue the bus ride made him, but there's a version of history where Dave Mustaine stays on that band and everything changes. He'll never not think about that version.
She's often inclined to borrow somebody's dreams.
Syd Barrett didn't destroy his career in one moment. He did it in slow motion over about 18 months, and somehow that's even harder to watch. Through 1967 and 68, the Pink Floyd frontman was unraveling in real time. He'd detune his guitar mid-performance on the US tour and just stand there. He'd refuse to leave the tour bus. He'd stare blankly at audiences like he'd forgotten where he was or why.
Have to think what a funny thing to do, 'cause I'm feeling very bad.
Management tried. The band tried. Nothing worked. Then one morning, the rest of Pink Floyd simply drove past his house without stopping to pick him up, and that was that. No dramatic confrontation, just a car that kept moving. Barrett had written most of their early material, had the most distinctive creative voice in the band, and was completely unreachable by the end. He retreated into isolation for the rest of his life. One of the most gifted songwriters of his generation, gone before the decade was out. The Pink Floyd bus just drove away.
Need someone's hand to lead me through the night.
Peter Green was one of the finest blues guitarists who ever lived, and that's not nostalgia talking, that's B.B. King talking, which makes what happened in Munich in 1970 genuinely tragic. Green's wine was spiked with LSD at a commune, and the experience broke something in him that never fully healed. Mick Fleetwood had to fly out to physically collect him. Shortly after, Green announced he wanted to give away all his money, make music for God, and walk away from the band he'd founded. And that's exactly what he did, right as Fleetwood Mac were breaking through internationally.
I need some lips to feel next to mine.
What followed were decades of mental health struggles, periods of complete withdrawal, and a guitar career that existed only in fragments. Green eventually found his way back to playing in later years, but the trajectory of what might have been is staggering. Fleetwood Mac went on without him and became one of the biggest bands in history. Green just left. One spiked glass, and the whole thing collapsed. Long Beach Arena, July 1980. The Eagles are mid-performance when Don Felder and Glenn Frey start muttering threats at each other across the stage in front of a paying audience. According to Felder's own account, he spent most of the set telling Frey exactly what he planned to do to him after the show. Frey was sending it right back. They somehow got through the performance without actually fighting, which, honestly, is impressive, in the worst way.
You can have your bed on a clean Corvette to get you there right on time.
That show became the last Eagles concert for 14 years, and the beginning of Felder's slow exit from the band he'd been a core part of since 1974. He was eventually fired in 2001, sued, countersued, and wrote a memoir that didn't exactly make him new friends in the Henley Frey camp. He also co-wrote Hotel California, arguably the most iconic rock song of the decade, and didn't play at their 2016 reunion. Just stood outside the building while it happened. That's a specific kind of painful.
Rising up through the
David Ellefson co-founded Megadeth with Dave Mustaine in 1983. He was there at the beginning, survived the chaos, got fired once, came back, and stuck around for nearly 40 years. Then in May 2021, a sexually explicit video of Ellefson leaked online, and within days, Megadeth terminated him. Not quietly, publicly, mid-album. The band had been deep into recording The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead when it happened, which means that his bass tracks were erased and re-recorded by someone else entirely. His name came off the credits. Decades of history, gone in the space of a week. The timing was almost designed to be maximally brutal, right in the middle of a record, with no graceful exit available. Ellefson has maintained his version of events since, but the outcome was the same either way. Fired from the band, he helped build. His contributions physically deleted from the record, literally removed from the tape. That is cold.
All the years, so many ways to count the deal. I never change.
January 2018. The MusiCares Person of the Year ceremony. Stevie Nicks is receiving the award, giving her speech. Lindsey Buckingham is somewhere in the room, and according to Nicks, he was smirking. Whether he was or wasn't, what happened next was fast. Within days, Buckingham was fired from Fleetwood Mac after 43 years. 43 years over a facial expression, or at least that's how the story goes. Then, months later, almost like the universe decided that wasn't enough, Buckingham underwent emergency open heart surgery. The procedure damaged his vocal cords.
I've been alone, always down. No one cared to stay around.
The voice he'd relied on his entire career was suddenly compromised at exactly the moment his band was gone. Career and health simultaneously. He's continued performing and recording since, but that stretch of months in 2018 represents one of the most concentrated runs of bad fortune any musician has ever experienced. And it started, allegedly, with a smirk. Keep your face neutral, people. Keep your face neutral.
And now you're swimming to the shore. You left me drowning in my tears.
April 2013. Bon Jovi are mid-tour. Hours before a show in Calgary, Richie Sambora, lead guitarist, co-writer, 30-year member, is gone. Personal reasons, said the statement. No warning, no real explanation, no return. The band found a replacement that night and kept going, which told you something about where things stood. Sambora and John Bon Jovi had been the creative engine of that band since the beginning. Together they wrote, "Livin' on a prayer, you give love a bad name. Wanted dead or alive." That partnership produced some of the biggest rock songs of the 80s. John later said the walkout was a heartbreak that took years to partially forgive. Sambora has said his own reasons were personal and real. Whatever the truth of it, the result was the same. 30 years as the band's lead guitarist and primary co-writer ended a few hours before a show in Canada with no real goodbye. That's one of the stranger endings in rock history. Still no reunion in sight. Here's one that still doesn't entirely make sense. Izzy Stradlin quit Guns N' Roses in November 1991 at the absolute peak of the Use Your Illusion era, when the band was arguably the biggest rock act on the planet. The tours were massive. The albums had just come out. The whole thing was on fire. And Izzy walked. The official reason was health. He'd gotten sober and the touring environment was incompatible with staying that way, which is hard to argue with. But the timing was staggering. Slash later admitted he was resentful for years. The rest of the band clearly felt the same, because when the long-awaited reunion finally happened in 2016, Axl, Slash, Duff, all back together, Izzy was deliberately excluded from the main lineup. He reportedly asked for an equal financial share. They said no. So the guy who co-wrote most of Appetite for Destruction watched the reunion from outside. Sometimes doing the right thing for yourself costs you everything else. Ace Frehley rejoining Kiss for the 1996 reunion should have been a clean story. Original lineup back together, everybody makes money, everybody wins. And for a while it kinda was. Then the old problems came back. Substance abuse returned badly during the Psycho Circus cycle, and things deteriorated fast. In 2000, Frehley fell off a stage during a concert, an image that spread quickly and wasn't easy to walk back. His second departure from Kiss was messier than his first, and considerably more final. The relationship with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley had already been difficult. This ended whatever was left of it. Kiss went on with replacements, the makeup got licensed out to other musicians, and Frehley was left watching the band he co-founded continue without him from a permanent distance. He's been outspoken, sometimes bitterly so, about how it all ended. The fall off the stage became a symbol of the whole thing. A reunion that was supposed to be triumphant, ending in something much sadder.
Made up my mind, I'm gonna do it right this time. I'll never leave her behind.
She'll put on her makeup and brushes her long blonde hair.
August 5th, 1976. Birmingham Odeon. Eric Clapton, slow hand. Living guitar legend, a man who built his entire reputation on Black American music, gets on stage drunk and delivers a racist anti-immigration rant in support of Enoch Powell. Specific, ugly, and very public. The backlash was immediate. Two musicians, Red Saunders and Roger Huddle, wrote an open letter that directly inspired the formation of Rock Against Racism, a movement that reshaped British political culture.
All around in my hometown, they're trying to track me down.
Clapton later called the speech full tilt racist, which at least suggests some self-awareness eventually arrived. But the damage was done, and the irony has never faded, because Clapton's guitar style was learned wholesale from the black blues tradition. Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, B.B. King. His career was built on that foundation. Then in 5 minutes of drunk ranting, he handed critics an argument that has followed him ever since, and complicated nearly everything written about his legacy. One night, one speech, 40 plus years of consequences.
One little bottom much drop powder. They said one day.
And here we are, 10 guitarists who had everything, and managed to torch it in the space of a moment. Some from ego, some from addiction, some from a single, terrible decision they couldn't take back. What's fascinating is how many of them went on to do extraordinary things anyway, because talent doesn't disappear just because you burn the bridge. But you can't help wondering what the alternative versions of these careers might have looked like. Mustaine in Metallica, Barrett fully present, Green at the height of his powers. We'll never know. Hit like, subscribe, and see you again next time.